questions to the speakers. Before I do that, I've got a couple of ideas that I want you to take home with you today. First and most important is that this is your community. These are your homes that you live in, right? If we are not going to stand up and fight for this, no one else is going to protect it for us, right?
Right.
When I first started getting engaged in this process, I really had no idea of what I could do or what I should do. I mean, and I say this truthfully, but I have been so privileged. And in hindsight, I'm so glad that I took that first step to get engaged. I have met so many people in this community, I've made so many friends, and I've seen this community and this town step up every time we needed you to. And I say this in all sincerity to everybody here. I really do feel privileged to live in Paris. And I feel that more today than I ever have. Since its inception in CCOB, just to give you some examples of what I'm talking about, I saw almost 200 people with pots and pans in hand marching through the center of this town and across the bridge over the Grand River, declaring their right to clean water. Shortly thereafter, our own council fired off a letter to the Minister of Natural Resources asking that this license be revoked. We filed our appeal this year to the Environmental Commissioner in December of 2012, and a month later, we packed this room to capacity in our general meeting. In June of this year, I saw this town and this community send over 900 letters to the Minister of the Environment asking, or in protest of Dufferin's request to draw water from our aquifer. And last month, Dave Levesque, your MPP, asked that there be a full environmental assessment. The point here is that we are gaining so many allies on this issue. And this is going to be a journey, a very long journey. Make no mistake about it. You know, listen to what Carl, the picture that Carl just painted for us. This is going to be a journey. But the key takeaway here is this. It was November 2 years ago that Dufferin told this community that they were going to commence operations of this large industrial scale facility on top of our aquifer. And it's still not here. So when somebody comes up to you and says, do you think we have a chance? Do you think we can stop this pit? You should look them straight in the eye and say, we already have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But this journey's not over, right? The stakes are huge here, and I want to emphasize this point. We're not talking about 614 acres. The province has identified the entire Paris Plains as, and I'm going to try and quote this, as a deposit of selected sand and gravel of significant importance. And this area that's available for extraction is 3,400 acres that's been identified. And that is in addition to the 600 acres that we're already talking about. So we're talking about in excess of 4,000 acres of land. So when somebody says to you, these levies that we get paid, the 7.5 cents that we get paid to fix our roads, how unfair this is. When we look at estimates from other communities, other counties that say the cost to fix our roads are 94 cents. That difference is 87 cents a ton, right? If this applies to this one pit, that's $870,000 a year, the taxpayers of this community are going to pay to fix the roads to allow this pit to open. If we extrapolate that same thing and say, let's apply it to the whole 4,000 acres, that's $5.7 million that the people of this community are going to pay. I mean, if those numbers are relevant. But it's unbelievable. You should be outraged. You should be as outraged at this as I am. The majority of this gravel, by the way, sits on top of our aquifer. So So again, I'm gonna say to you, if you are mildly upset about the idea that somebody can dig a 600-acre hole right beside your town wells, what are you gonna feel like when the Minister of Natural Resources licenses the other 3,400 acres on the other side of your wells? Maybe you've been told by someone that these pits, these gravel pit owners are held to the highest standard of rehabilitation. And you've been told that you as a community are guaranteed that this will be restored to farmland. Think again. Dufferin, by their own admission in our community advisory panel, has told us they just sold their Whistlebear pit to another corporation unrehabilitated. How is that possible? How many people in this room have seen the pit down West Acres Road that still sits there? How is it possible that any corporation, and under the Aggregate Review Act, we are supposedly promised rehabilitation, that they will restore this land? How is it possible that a corporation could sell to another corporation the property before they have done what they have committed to a community to do, right? For me, this issue has evolved in the last couple of years, and it's really evolved into an issue of my family, right? And the community that I live in. And my children's right to drink clean water. And about all the farms that sit on that plains that feed so many families. This is a resource that we need to protect. We need to protect it for all the generations. This journey is not over, but I have no doubt that we can win this if we want to. But you have to ask yourself this one question. What are you going to do? Because it isn't going to be the great efforts of a few people that win this battle. It's going to be the little efforts of a lot of people that win this battle.
Right on.
We need your support as CCOB. We need it both in activity and finances. And we understand that everybody is not created equally. We all come from different circumstances, and not everybody can give money. But you can call a counselor, right? Steve Schmidt and John Wheat, and I think John Wheat is here today, actually. You can call them and say, what are you doing to help us on this issue? You can call the mayor who is here today. And I have to say this, just to add what Carl said earlier, we have always got audience with our council. The politicians have been helpful to us. And we have to remember that they are our allies. Council of Canadians has graciously extended to us an opportunity to help us with a civil disobedience course. Now, this is not about chaining yourself to a bulldozer, right? This is about how you can object to this in a meaningful and substantive way, and in a legal way. So if you're up for that, sign up. We just published our calendar, and I am a little bit biased. But I have to say, Mike and Dana and the crew have done an awesome job. I mean, if you look at some of these pictures of Paris and you look at this, it's just awesome. And it's only $10. So I'm not going to ask you to buy one, I'm going to ask you to buy a whole bunch. And give them to all your family members for Christmas. Think about it. You can save yourself hours of shopping time and you'll be doing good. Right?
Well sold, yeah.
And for those of you who can afford to do it, you should give a donation. There's jars around here that you can contribute to. And I'm going to challenge everybody here, right? If you go to Tim Hortons and you buy a coffee and a muffin, it's $3. If you do that every day for a year, it's over $1,000. And I'm not asking people to give a ridiculous amount of money. But this job is not going to get done on wishful thinking either, right? So ask yourself the question, like, what is this worth to me? And if you've heard anything today that motivates you, then do something about it. sign a letter, buy a calendar, sign up for an activity, join the core group, and create some of these ideas that will move us forward in this journey. We need everybody engaged in this. Okay? Now I'm going to turn the floor over to questions. So I'd like the speakers to come up and have an opportunity to answer some questions. There's going to be a couple of rules. Louis and Sandra are going to hold mic, I think. So if you have a question, we'd like you to address it to the individual. We'll give you 1 minute to ask one question. If you have multiple questions, we'd ask you just ask one and then line up again. Just to give everybody an opportunity to speak. Okay? Sure. And we're going to wrap up fairly quickly, like 15 or 20 minutes, okay? Now, if you don't get to ask a question, don't worry about it. We're going to have coffee and dessert afterwards, and everybody will get a chance to get their questions answered, okay? Who's first? Come on, don't be shy.
Apparently I'm not allowed to touch the mic, so. My name is Heather Gingrich, and I'm with the Water School for Decision Makers. I'm just wondering what you can advocate in terms of letting the municipal councilors know what their sort of new superpowers are in terms of food and water protection from a municipal bylaw perspective. Under Section 19 of the Safe Drinking Water Act, which came into effect January 1st of 2013. So is this sort of widely known? And for you, Mr. Cossack, was this something that you used at all? And if you knew about it, maybe it came into play, but what would you have done from the municipal bylaw perspective to address this issue? Thank you.
So I did not use the section we did, and when I say I, it has nothing to do with me, it's the Board of NDAC. Municipal councils are often hampered by superseding provincial or federal legislation. This is not an excuse, it's just a fact of life. In our case, our council stood up enough to say, even so we know we're governed by a different law, but we're still here to represent our people, and therefore Melanchthon Council decided to speak up in the strongest of all terms. Even so, it is a provincial jurisdiction, and there's nothing in the official plan that Melanchthon as a municipality could have done on its own. Needed the provincial support of it. So the source water, if I understand it correctly, and I might not, source water legislation applies to municipal wells, not yet to rural wells and small communities. It's coming that way. At this point in time, the Aggregate Resources Act exempts aggregate applications from all that legislation. Look at Guelph, the low-lying mine in Guelph. MOE gave the water taking permit. The city of Guelph objected because it's just I can't speak to the specific section that you asked me about. I can only say that local lower tier municipal bylaws often superseded by provincial planning. Yet that does not say your council can't be a loud voice in the right side.